Teachers, what's the worst case of no, not my child you've ever seen from a parent house being called in for their kid's behavior? I had a parent follow me to my offices multiple times after I caught a son cheating. He was caught red-handed. The policy is a 0. It just happened to be on the biggest grade of the year, pretty much failing him for the class. His mother came to lecture me that he would never. I showed her the proof video of him in class cheating, and she began screaming that it was doctored footage. I kicked her out of my office. It didn't stop there. She came to a faculty meeting, tried to take me to court, and followed me through a store one day. I had to call the cops. Also, this was when I was an adjunct at a college and the student in question was 23. English teacher here had a student submit a verbatim copied and pasted review of a book from one of those homework help websites. The problem for her was that I hadn't asked for a review. I had asked for an essay about the main character. When I called the mother to talk about it, she demanded to meet me and the principal to talk about my incorrect accusation. I brought her daughter's essay and the original submission to the homework website. The mom first tried to argue that the daughter wrote both. When I pointed out that the publication date was from several years earlier, she tried to argue that with so many students submitting writing to me, someone was bound to accidentally write something identical to someone else. You read that correctly. She was trying to argue that her daughter just happened to write an identical review, word for word, instead of admitting that her daughter copied and pasted the assignment. The principal responded by saying, "Ma'am, that's statistically improbable. Pretty much impossible." The mother refused to back down and argued that there's a first time for everything and that in no way would her daughter ever plagiarize. Her daughter was suspended the next week for copying and pasting an entire essay for her psychology class. Edit, my school didn't do after school detentions. Instead, we do one day in school suspensions. There was a kid in my class whose father was a Wall Street banker and his mom was a doctor. Basically, the kid's parents were never around. This kid was the freaking worst. He would stick tacks on other kids' chairs when they got up to blow their nose or sharpen their pencil. I caught him rifling through other students' lunches one morning, and he had a pack of Twinkies in his hand. I told him to put the Twinkies back and sent him to the principal. One time he was having a beef with some other kid and waited for the kid to use the bathroom, followed him in, and punched him in the gut. There are no security cameras in the bathroom and he didn't leave a mark, so nobody could really prove anything one way or the other. During parent-teacher conference I told his mom that her son needs to stop playing poker on his Apple Watch during class as well as some other proven behavior problems. She flew off the handle and said, "How dare you accuse my son of doing that stuff, you dumb broad." That conversation explained a lot about where he got it. A 4-year-old boy in my class was picking fights on a daily basis and would lash out at teachers that tried to intervene. Punching, kicking, throwing chairs, screaming at the top of his lungs. He was being raised by his grandma who was thoroughly convinced that everything we told her was exaggerated or that the other kids were the ones starting the fights. When I was 6 months pregnant, he was mad that outside time was over, so he pushed me with both of his arms right in my belly. When I told his grandma, she asked if I was having a girl. I was. She chuckled. He's fighting with her because boys and girls don't get along. It'd be a miracle if that kid doesn't end up in prison. Edit, since a lot of people are asking, my child is totally perfect and the shove didn't do any damage. Also, for those suggesting the kid should have been shoved or smacked or kicked across the room, please keep in mind that he was 4. As teachers, it's our jobs to be more control of our emotions than our students. She said her child was only acting out / not doing work because he's being influenced by the satanic imagery in our classroom. Then she pointed to the Coco poster on the wall. A girl in my 5th grade class would bully me by calling me fat, a loser, called my clothes ugly, told me my bedroom was ugly after my mom just redecorated it. The final straw was one time she and someone who used to be my best friend organized a game of truth or dare where they dared all the boys in my class to come up and say they liked me and then turn around and say, "Just kidding. No one would ever like you because you're ugly." I told my mom, who came to pick me up early, who then marched down to the teacher to tell her. The teacher was livid and threatened to have all the kids put in detention and excluded from the end of year party unless they apologized. They all apologized while rolling their eyes with their arms crossed except for one of the boys who was crying and apologizing profusely. He even went out of his way to say sorry to me the next day because he felt so bad. They all got phone calls to their parents. The rest of them never spoke to me again, but this girl's parents' reaction was to essentially congratulate her. And then since she had already been caught, they encouraged her two older jock twin brothers who went to high school to target my older brother. They started cutting the straps on his backpacks, and we were poor and couldn't afford another backpack after the second one, so he had to carry his backpack in his arms. They had no shame. Even when my mom would come to pick us up from school, they would sit there, parents and kids yelling shoot at my mom, while we were sitting in the car. I remember they had their dumbest kids' names and their softball/baseball numbers as stickers on their back window. One time the girl came into school with a giant, swollen black/bloody eye that looked fresh. She said it was from softball, but I wonder. Not a teacher, but my wife volunteered at the school store where kids could buy erasers, pencils, etc. Two older girls repeatedly came in and stole things on camera while she was working. She reported it, and they called the girls and the parents in, told them what happened, and they said their children wouldn't do that. Then the school showed the parents the video and the parents still claimed their children wouldn't steal, all while watching it happen on video. They were banned from the store and the parents actually said that the school was just being racist because their daughters wouldn't steal. 3 kids in a 4/5 split didn't like one of their teachers. During journal time they decided to get together and drew a picture of that teacher surrounded by penises and the words "teacher sucks dicks for money." Obviously, the teacher found it and showed the principal, who called the parents in. These were 10 over 11-year-olds, 2 girls and 1 boy. The parents of the girls were mad, but the mother of the boy refused to believe it was him. She went back and forth with the principal, completely denying her son's involvement until the principal finally had enough, slammed her hand down on the book, and yelled "It's in his journal," and the little genius signed his name. Many years ago I had this awful boy in the next class with a girl that was not at all there. I was the teacher next door. They were about 7. One of the boys was basically banging the girl up against a desk from behind very hard, and it was hurting the girl. So he'll pull back a bit and then slam himself as hard as he can against her, but as she's bent over a table. These kids are 7, so who knows what's going through their head. I'm not implying anything. Shouted stop. They stopped. Then I told their teacher. That's all I did. Teacher wrote a note home. Parent comes in livid, shouting at everyone saying I scared the kid. Doesn't matter what their kid was doing. If I ever say anything to the kid again, they'll get me fired. Boss watched the video, cleared me of wrongdoing. Notes the kid had been abusing that girl for a while before I got there. Told the parents. She didn't give 2 fricks. Railed on about how I traumatized her child by yelling stop while her kid was assaulting a mentally handicapped girl. A kiddo tried to bite a classmate and his dad flipped out. These kids are between 1 and 2. 5 at this point, so some biting is par for the course. It's a really common behavior that can come from a lot of causes: teething, frustration, affection, so seasoned toddler teachers don't generally panic. I like to give families a gentle heads up if I notice their kid attempt a bite, even if it's unsuccessful. This starts the conversation early, so if they manage to bite someone and leave a mark, it's not as shocking, since I'm required to do paperwork when someone causes an injury. This usually works really well at helping families know that I'm not kicking their kid out or punishing them for biting. But this dad lost it. He claimed his child has never bitten and would never do that, and accused me of teaching/letting him learn to bite. No level of talking about his child's positive behaviors or the science behind biting helped. He started making demands that I punish any child who bites to discourage the behavior. We didn't get along well for the rest of the year. I had a boy 8 or 9 at the time in my classroom who would spit at the girls, pinch other kids, and generally was not very social. When I told his mother that he was not paying attention during class and runs around and distracts other pupils, even though I and they told him several times to leave them alone, she wouldn't hear it. She just answered that he must be up during class BC. He is so helpful. In her opinion, the boy wasn't distracting the others, he was helping. She wouldn't hear any of the other things I told her, simply ignored it. Then she complained that there was too much homework and that it was too difficult because she couldn't do it for him anymore. At that point I just waffed in my head and hoped for the conversation to be over soon. ESL teacher. In Korea, I was called back to the private school late at night. An angry mother was there. Through a Korean teacher, she was livid. I called her daughter a thief for stealing some felt markers. I told her the daughter had the pens on her, admits to having the pens. And then I showed her the CCTV where my back was turned, and she grabbed the pens on her way out. The mother insisted the daughter didn't take them. She took them outside and gave them to a boy who took them, even though she still had the pens in her bag. By that time I had enough. Told her to leave. She argued. Said something rude in Korean and she scurried away. I'm 6 foot and 200 pounds. Huge in Korea. Then my boss broke down in tears. Apparently the mother was hitting my boss before I came in. I didn't know. I said if that ever happened again for any reason, call me and it'd be there in minutes to throw whoever out on their rear. Spanish teacher here. One time a kid used Google Translate and did English, French, and tried to hand in his paper. He was such an idiot that he didn't even realize it was in French instead of Spanish. The parents would not accept that their son used a translator. A family on the street had a lot of kids that ranged from toddler to in their 30s. I think they had about 15 to 20 children in total and tons of grandchildren. They owned 2 houses that were side by side on my street, as well as the 2 houses directly behind them on the next street over. Then they knocked down all the fences, so the houses were all essentially on one connected lot. This family was huge, so people would constantly come and go. All of them were generally assholes and bullies. They said a lot of racist stuff. Their high school aged son sprayed bug spray in some elementary school kids' eyes. They would constantly borrow things like bikes and skateboards from other kids in the neighborhood and completely destroy them. They would break people's Christmas decorations and stuff in their yards. They were always fighting. One of them actually killed somebody in an armed robbery, and another attempted to kill somebody, but none of their kids ever did anything wrong, according to the parents. All they kept saying was that their kids were good little Christians who went to church 3 days per week. I tried really hard to avoid them, but I lived right next door, went to school with some of them, and some of them were my age. So it was kind of impossible. So, not a teacher, but this kid in my class used to hit other kids pretty regularly without any teacher intervention, because it was either outside of school or just a small peck that hurt, but wasn't really making someone cry. One day this kid became so aggressive he almost beat the shit out of a kid in our class. In our classroom. The teacher was away, but we all saw him do it. Teacher came back and saw him hit the kid. We were all so surprised we didn't know what to do. I was called as witness, and we got sent out of class. I wasn't in any trouble, of course. The parents of both of them got called, and they arrived at the school between an hour and 2 hours. When the situation was explained, the parents of the kid who started hitting the other kid just wouldn't believe it was their son who did it. Our son wouldn't hurt a fly. He has never been aggressive. Even after I told them this wasn't the only time, they would call me stupid and a filthy liar. They even brought in other kids from our class. The son noticed his parents defending him and started saying he would never hit anyone, and definitely not him, because he liked him as a person. Well, the school decided to suspend the kid and we've never seen him since. He moved to another school and the parents tried to sue the school for them suspending the kid. Don't think it worked. Sorry for botched grammar/English edit. Thanks for all the kind words. Made me more confident of my English usage. D. I have a case of the opposite of this. As the parent, I got 4 phone calls in 2 weeks from the school about my 7-year-old son's behavior, having emotional breakdowns in weird situations, and I finally had enough and left work to drive to his school and sit down with his teachers and the principal so we could come up with a game plan. I was 100% on their side. My son can be very whinny when he thinks he's bad at something or when people don't understand him, so I wanted them to tell me what I could do better at home to shape it out of him. The school was baffled that I drove up there to meet with them about it. They refused to let me speak with his teachers, said that they were extremely familiar with my son, and that he was an angel, and one of everyone's favorite kids. They said compared to the actual troublemakers, my son's whining wasn't even a blip on the radar. I asked why I was getting repeated phone calls about how bad his behavior was, and they said it was just protocol to let us know if there was a behavior issue, but that it wasn't anything I should worry about. Was very frustrating. My wife was sobbing at home after the second phone call thinking that we'd raised a monster and that we were horrible parents. My friend is a teacher who got headbutted the other day by a 7-year-old. The parents said back quote, "He must have been provoked. What kind of human being are you that you answer a call that says your kid headbutted an adult and you look to make excuses for them?" Teacher here. When a student threw himself at me, and it was my fault for being 24 at the time and therefore more their age than the staff's age, so it's understandable, and I should be flattered. Question mark? My friend is a teacher. She had a kid who threatened to shoot up the school last year. I guess it got pretty far as it was considered a viable threat and the police were called. They searched his house for weapons, found some minor weapons from my understanding, but no major guns or anything. The items were confiscated, and he continues to go to the school in her classes. He looks up white supremacy and gun stuff on the computers at school regularly. His mom says the situation last year was just his little mistake. Side note, this was not in the US. I follow a lot of crime news. A 16-year-old boy murdered this girl who was supposedly pregnant with his kid and didn't tell him after 6 months. I guess she had some foresight into the type of person he was, but still wanted to keep the kid. Anyway, the guy's parents come out saying it wasn't his fault. He would never do something like that. He has always been a good boy. Makes me wonder if his family is just in denial, or if you really can't know what somebody may be plotting even in your own home. I worked in a small town with one elementary, one middle and one high school. It was the kind of place where everyone knew each other. Everyone was somehow creepily related to one another, and parents were hit or miss when it came to support. I was teaching pre-K, and I had one student who was the son of a teacher at the same school. I expressed concerns about the child because he showed signs of autism, and mom, a fellow teacher at school, wrote it off as him being spoiled. Noise was a huge trigger for the student. He wouldn't interact with his peers in the class or at recess, and he was very particular about the way things were done. All year I told his mom that he worked well one-on-one, but he struggled in a large group environment, usually due to the noise. He was very smart, but he could benefit from a smaller class environment. Long story short, in May mom decided that maybe she would agree to get him evaluated, and then proceeded to ignore the results. I still think about that student and hope he has gotten the help he needs to be successful. Be a student in the same class as the one mentioned above. Same year. It was eventful. He decided one day that he did not like me. I believe he had a lot going on. Dad had just gone to prison and mom was very sketchy and prone to blaming siblings' teachers when things went wrong. The boy began destroying my room out of anger daily. He would jump off of desks, stand on chairs, try to climb other furniture and harm others in anger. I frequently called/texted mom, and one day she finally came to school for a meeting and told me that I was picking on her child. She told me other kids did things and didn't get in trouble, but I was targeting her child. Yay, okay. He would kick me and punch me, and I would write it all down. Mom ended up threatening me over Facebook. Small town. Everyone knew about it, and my principal had me file a police report. Parents and future parents, please don't be blind. It sucks hearing bad stuff about your child, but teachers don't just make it up because they hate your kid. I teach 7th grade math. One of my students' mothers is so convinced that her child is God's gift to this earth. She says that math and science are his best subjects. Coincidentally, he's failing both subjects. Of course she blames the teachers. Was a teacher in my previous career. That's another story. It was a private school with uniforms, but one girl repeated showed up in a skirt that was just too short. It barely covered her butt, much less anything else, when she bent over. When we had parent-teacher conference, I had the opportunity to mention it to her mom. Of course, she said, no, not my child, because mom's skirt was just too short. Why bother putting your daughter in a school with uniforms and paying private tuition when you don't bother to follow the rules? They left after that year. Wonder why.